So let me introduce Councilman Green. Derek Green has served on City Council since 2015, and he chairs both the Finance Committee, which is relevant tonight, and the Disabilities Committee. He's also Vice Chair of the Committee on Aging and the Committee on Law and Government. Councilman Green has local roots. He was president of East Mount Airy Neighbors and also first vice president of the Germantown YMCA. At the national level, he's a member of the National Black Caucus of Local Elected Officials, the Executive Committee of the Democratic National Committee, and the Executive Committee of the National League of Cities. Councilman Green's resume is extensive and reflects the many and varied ways he has been serving Philadelphia throughout his career, both before and after earning his law degree. I encourage all of you to visit his website and read more about his many contributions and the way they've been recognized. And now I'm very pleased to welcome Councilman Green. Thank you.
I'm going to mute everybody and let Councilman Green unmute himself.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for that overview of some of the things I've done in my background. Some of those things I did when I actually had some hair, which I really don't have much now. It reminded me, and I'm maybe dating myself, of This Is Your Life. Whenever they read a bio, you start thinking about, wow, did I actually do all those things? But it's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I see some familiar faces. And I would be remiss if I did not give a shout out to who I would say is the Oprah Winfrey of public radio in the city of Philadelphia, one Vanessa Lowe, who has joined me on many a Zoom over the years in reference to the public bank with financing Philadelphia's future. But briefly, because I do want to get into some of the questions you may have, and from my career really kind of dovetails how I got involved in this space of public banking. When I came out of the University of Virginia and I was a manager trainee for Meridian Bank, some of you may remember Meridian Bank, professionals with a personal touch. So Meridian really was a very strong retail and small business bank. And so I was a small business lender for Meridian Bank. And when I finished the manager trainee program, I was an assistant branch manager and small business lender for the Meridian branch in Broad and Glenwood. And at that time, in the early 90s, I really got a chance to see the decades of impact of redlining and what it had done to North Philadelphia, as well as during my rotation as manager trainee, other parts of the city of Philadelphia. And so when I was at Meridian, we were able to do some creative things because we had our own lending authority. And so we could provide loans to small businesses based on our own underwriting criteria that met the parameters of lending criteria within the bank, but each lender had their own lending authority. Shortly thereafter, after a couple of years of working in banking, many banks started to move into credit scoring or FICO scores. I decided to leave banking and went to law school and had a number of different experiences in securities and finance related activities, working in the Securities and Exchange Commission and also in Delaware in the Delaware Department of Justice and Securities Division. And my path and career went a number of different ways, eventually bringing me to the City of Philadelphia Law Department, where I had a chance to represent a lot of the economic development agencies in the City of Philadelphia. Agencies like the city's Commerce Department, Redevelopment Authority, Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation. And when I was there, my former boss, Councilmember Marion Tasco, saw that some of her members and longtime friends who were members of Bright Hope Baptist Church were starting to see that they got into loans that they were upside down. Many of them had been either widows or widowers, and they didn't understand how at one point their home was just about paid off and they borrowed some money, and now they owed more money than they thought that they actually had borrowed. And so that was kind of the beginning of the predatory lending issue here, not only in the city of Philadelphia, but around the country. And working with Councilman Tasco, passed one of the nation's first anti-predatory lending bills, which became a model for a number of other cities. Unfortunately, it was preempted by the Pennsylvania General Assembly. Then, Councilman Tasco decided to retire. I decided to run for city council, and I was successful. And in probably my first few months of being in office, some members of the Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition, people that I knew who lived in the northwest section of the city, much like myself, brought to me this idea of public banking. And it kind of brought my whole career full circle back to my time and working with Councilman Tasco, and even going back to working at Meridian Bank as a small business lender. And this whole idea of public banking and really exposed me to the fact that we've had public banks here in the nation. The most prominent public bank that we currently have is the Bank of North Dakota, that really came out of severe economic challenges during the recession, and there was a need to create a banking infrastructure in the state of North Dakota. And now many of the student loans that people receive in North Dakota originated through some connection to the Bank of North Dakota and became a banker's bank. And so, having had experience as a small business lender, seeing the impact of redlining, seeing the impact of so many businesses, especially Black and brown businesses, that did not get access to credit, even though the owners of those businesses had been successful in running their businesses, but were not really able to grow their businesses because of a lack of access to credit. In addition, having been a longtime member of Weaver's Way Co-op and also being involved with various cooperative organizations, I know that it's very hard to lend to non-traditional institutions like cooperatives, and that's also impacted their ability to grow. And then finally, because I am someone who very strongly believes in how we grow the green collar economy, I work very closely with the Philadelphia Energy Authority and other industries that are also trying to grow in that space. That's another hard to lend to entity. So when I started learning about public banking, I thought maybe this is something that we can bring to Philadelphia, provide a way to provide access to credit to hard to lend to entities like Black and brown businesses in the city of Philadelphia, or like cooperatives, or like green collar economy companies or industries, especially like in the solar industry that we're trying to grow. So coming out of those conversations, we had hearings in city council about this whole idea of public banking and how we could use the city's resources to help do different initiatives within the city and not have those resources which come from taxpayers like all of us on this Zoom call, and not have it be in the account of a large private institution, but have it in a financial entity like the Bank of North Dakota, which is owned and controlled by the citizens of the city of Philadelphia, and really make our tax dollars and our deposits that we put into those private banks put into a public bank and have it work for us. So we did hearings on this whole idea of public banking. Then we decided to bring in an outside consultant called HRNA to really help us do a feasibility study to see if that's something that would be viable for the city of Philadelphia. So after a period of time and having a lot of conversations with groups from around the city in all different capacities, we're starting to finalize the HRNA report. But then this new dynamic called COVID-19 happened. So that put us on a pause for a period of time. We then were able to finish the report at the beginning of the transition of the pandemic, and use that report to then see how could we introduce legislation here in the city of Philadelphia. So we introduced an initial bill to kind of start the conversation regarding how to create a public bank in the city of Philadelphia. From there, we knew that we needed some additional expertise to help us navigate very significant regulatory challenges for a public bank. So going through the budget process, we're able to retained outside counsel, international law firm by the name of Holland and Knight. And they worked with us for several months along with the city's law department and the city's treasurer's office to help us draft amendments to the predatory lending bill that we started. One of the things that we noticed that unlike in other parts of the country, like for example, in California, they have enabling legislation at their state level that was passed by the General Assembly that allows cities in California to start their own bank. Here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we don't have the same enabling legislation. So we had to go through a lot of legal research, I'll say, to kind of figure out how could we create this public bank entity here in the city of Philadelphia, which is in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So in addition to talking with Holland and Knight, we also had extensive conversations with the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities, and we ultimately decided to create a municipal authority, which is an entity within the city of Philadelphia that will give us the first step towards a public bank. And this municipal authority that we call the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority will give us the ability to help some of those hard to lend to entities that I previously talked about, like Black and brown businesses, like cooperatives, like those who want to go into the green collar industry, like solar companies. And so we then decided to tweak the legislation to create the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority as a way to take one step towards a public bank, with the idea that once we get this entity up and running, then we could use this entity to help start a actual public bank as a subsidiary. And so legislation that we amended was passed in March of this year, passed 15-1. And so our plan now is, as we're going through the budget process, which I talked about earlier, is to get resources from the administration for the initial operating dollars for the public bank. We're looking at $3 million as part of our budget process, as well as have appointments to this new entity. Because of the existing laws and complicated laws we have here in the city of Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority has to have two boards. One board has to be appointed by the mayor, and we're calling that the corporate board. That board will make recommendations to the mayor, and the mayor will make his appointees. And then that corporate board would then appoint a policy board. And it's the policy board that will actually make the decisions on the businesses and the entities and the nonprofit organizations that will receive letters of credit. And that policy board will also hire an executive director. And so in addition to talking with the law department and our outside counsel and Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities, we also had extensive conversations with the city's ethics board. We put language into the legislation that would give the ethics board oversight over this new entity, because we wanted to make sure that in creating a entity that was going to be providing these type of services, that it had the protections to make sure we didn't have any type of nefarious or unethical behavior occur. And so that's why the ethics board, as an independent entity, has oversight over the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority, because we put that language into the legislation when it was introduced and then passed. And so now, as we're getting to the end of this council session, and we're trying to not only get the mayor to make the appointments to this new entity, but also to allocate money in the budget process. And I've been reaching out to my council colleagues that as we are negotiating, and I want to remind them that they did support this new idea 15-1, and asking for their support for the financing for this new entity. And we've sent a letter to the mayor kind of stating our interest in making sure that the mayor makes the appointments for this new authority and allocates the money both for the operating dollars and the capitalization, so we can get up and running. So that way we can start to really provide some of the services to help grow businesses. And I'll close with this. This entity has really become a model in a number of different cities around the country. I know I've spoken to local elected officials in New York and San Francisco and other parts of the country looking at the legislation that we've been successful in doing here in Philadelphia. But when I think about the challenges we're seeing right now in the city of Philadelphia, especially as it pertains to public safety and gun violence. And from my experience, and I've also been an assistant district attorney, as well as an attorney that's represented small businesses, and I've had my own small business. The number one way to address public safety and gun violence is a job. And the best creators of jobs are small businesses. But when we have statistics in the city of Philadelphia where 43% of the population is African American, but only 1 out of 6 businesses with employees are owned by African Americans, that shows a disconnect between the population and small businesses in the city of Philadelphia. When we look at the Latinx community, which has about an 18% population, 1 out of every 4 businesses with employees are owned by people from the Latin diaspora. So we clearly have a disconnect between Black and brown populations and successful businesses that have employees. And so the idea of having this Philadelphia Public Financial Authority, which can provide access to letter credits to let and help those businesses to grow, to me is one way to address the public safety issues. Because if these businesses are now able to go from having 1 or 2 employees to now having 3, 5, or 6 employees, that's going to provide more jobs in neighborhoods around the city of Philadelphia. And by having more jobs, provides more resources for people to invest in either buying a home or invest in an existing home, which also helps our education system and helps to improve the quality of life of our city. So to me, all of these issues are interconnected. And that's one of the reasons why I've been spending so much time on this issue as we try to move our city forward, especially with all the challenges that we have right now. Helena, I think you are mute.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You managed to cover a lot of ground, and we're grateful. So let me ask people, because Councilman Green's time is short, if you have a question, please put it in the chat, and he will try to answer until he runs out of time. So,
and I see Leonard, I'm sorry. Leonard
yes,
just
go
put
ahead. We'll start with Leonard, and let me invite others to get their questions.
Yeah, and he asked a question on the difference of a letter of credit and a bank loan. They are very similar. They're both lending products. Traditionally, you have lines of credit. Letter of credit is generally more like a guarantee, where you're saying that this entity that is getting a loan or getting some other type of financial product, you're basically guaranteeing that business or borrower is going to have the ability to pay back that loan. Pay back that loan. Often a letter of credit there's a fee associated with a letter of credit, somewhat different than a line of credit or loan where there's an interest rate. Generally, there's a flat fee for that type of product or service, and basically it's kind of like you're almost like a cosigner. So when we're talking about letters of credit and credit enhancements, that's what I'm talking about. Most banks, credit unions, other type of lenders traditionally do not provide letters of credit. Their business literally is to receive your deposits and pay out a rate of interest and lend out those deposits at a higher rate of interest. So they really don't do letters of credit. Often you see those type of credit enhancements in import-export areas. But this is a way of trying to create a product that is different than some of the other products being offered by traditional banks and credit unions and nonprofit organizations or even community development financial institutions. And so we're really trying to find a way to create address a need that's not being served by other financial institutions. Okay. So I'll touch on a couple of questions. Someone asked what are the risks, and I did give some perspective on making sure that we are having this as a very ethical organization, and that's why we have the involvement of the ethics board in the drafting and the oversight of the organization. I mean, there are risks in the sense that if you provide a letter of credit to a business, there's a possibility that business may not be able to fully pay back that loan. But from my perspective, what's happening right now is that you have existing business owners who are not able to get access to credit and they're not able to grow the business. So to me, the risk that we're taking now is that we're not being able to grow businesses in our city. Now, the result of that lack of growth, that's also a lack of jobs in our city. And when you think about some of the challenges we have as a city, a lot of that ties to the fact we have not been able to grow family sustaining jobs in the city of Philadelphia. So I see a question in reference to, well, what can voters do to help with this process? Well, continue to advocate to your members of council. I know a number of organizations within the Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition have been reaching out to members and the mayor to ask them to support the $3 million for the budget request and for the mayor to help us in appointing board members to the new entity. There was a question about those who are opposed. Well, we've heard a lot of concerns by traditional banks. Traditional banks are concerned because, we at a municipal or public level would be able to have lower rates of interest. Our borrowing costs would be a lot cheaper, and we don't have the profit motive that a Wells Fargo or Citizens or other private banks have. And so because we don't have that same profit motive, there's less of a need to get a certain rate of return on those letters of credit or credit enhancements. So some of the concerns I've heard is that they're afraid that even though this entity is focusing on letters of credit and guarantees, that it could get into areas that are direct competition with them, and they just couldn't compete. And to me, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That just makes them have to be more aggressive in reference to how to provide services to people that traditionally have not been served. There was a question about how can we ensure that council allocates the funds in the budget to enable the plans for the bank to go forward. Well, if if we get the support by members of council and council members have stated they will support that, they will put that into the budget and then we negotiate with the mayor. And then it's ultimately because of the way our form of government is structured, we do have a strong mayor form of government. And so we could put dollars into a budget and ultimately it's up to the mayor to spend those dollars. And so if we're able to get this support through our members of council, then we may have to put pressure on the mayor to actually spend those dollars. I did send a letter to the mayor last week, just restating that this legislation passed, the number of people that voted for this legislation, as well as making a request for the $3 million for operating dollars. I learned today I'll be getting a letter back from the administration in response to my letter. So I have not seen that. But if it comes back in a way that does not support this initiative, I will continue to advocate for the support of this new entity. Okay, so a couple questions in reference to where does the bank's money come from? I think I kind of touched on that in reference to deposits and loans. And are there limits on amounts of loans that can be made and the size of companies that can get loans? Well, one of the things by having these two interlocking boards, the policy boards, ones that are going to make the direct decisions on lending, whereas the corporate board is more of the larger policy decisions. And those are some of the things that the entity, once it gets up and running, will make decisions on. To me, it was important to get the organization up and running and have people of different backgrounds like small business lending and economic development perspectives and affordable housing. And those are some of the things that are in the bylaws of the legislation. But the board and the staff, they will make those decisions in reference to the size of loans that can be made into what type of companies. But like any new venture, they'll have to start slow. The good thing is that there are two similar type of entities that have also started in the city of Philadelphia recently. And we really kind of followed the steps that they took in order to get started. So the Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation started a fund called the Accelerator Fund to help grow small residential developers in the city of Philadelphia. And then the Philadelphia Energy Authority created the Philadelphia Green Capital Corporation, which is a green bank to provide financing for businesses that are in solar industry or some of the other green collar industries that I talked about earlier. And so we're using those two entities as models for the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority. The Financial Authority is a municipal authority, much like the Philadelphia Energy Authority is also a municipal authority. And the leadership of those existing organizations and the newer organizations, we've had extensive conversations with them. And so we've used them as a model, not only for the initial budgeting, but also for some of the ideas on capitalization.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I tried
think that
to not give you too much data at one time because I can get a little wonky in the details. So hopefully I did not get too detailed in that space, but definitely appreciate the opportunity. I will put in the chat feature my email address. So if anyone wants to send me a follow-up email, has other questions about the public bank, or just has questions in general about issues regarding city government. I'm sorry, that's my son. Any issues regarding city government, regarding quality of life issues, concerns that you have. Although I do live in Mount Airy, I'm an at-large member of city council. So when people say, what's your council district? The whole city is my council district. So yes, Julian. So feel free to reach out to me if you have questions or concerns. Like I said, I included my email address in the chat feature as well as my phone number. So feel free to send me an email, send a phone call. So if issues you like that we're doing, or issues you don't like. I try to get out of City Hall as much as possible because you really can't see what's happening in our city if you're in City Hall all day. Now, my staff and I have been in City Hall since last August, trying to handle constituent issues for people all over the city. But if you have issues and concerns or critiques, feel free to reach out, shoot, and send me an email or give me a phone call because I think that's the only way we're going to have movement as the city of Philadelphia is by having conversations, having dialogue, and a real meaningful exchange of information and ideas if we're going to really move our city, our state, or our nation forward.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Can we have a round of applause, a Zoom applause for Councilman Green?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to let you go. I have a few announcements that you probably don't need to stay for, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Be well, everyone. Take care.
You. Thank you. I just wanted to let the rest of you know that we do have one more program, July 20th. We'll be hosting Karen Lightness, who will be presenting on Beatrice Potter. She has a presentation she does on Beatrice Potter, and there'll be more to come on that. Also, a reminder that we have socials every Saturday morning at the Fairway, and every Thursday, the first Thursday of the month at 4 p.m. So the Saturdays start at 10 and go till 12, and you can come anytime in there. And actually, Arnie and I will be hosting this weekend. So you can come out and talk public bank with us now that we've all heard this presentation.